Hi, John. Hi,
Hi, how are you?
good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. How you doing, Alyssa? Alyssa, I think you're on mute. Are you?
I am.
Oh, there you
But
are.
our speaker should work. Yeah, you can hear me now?
I can hear you
Everything's
now.
great.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Having technical issues?
No, I just noticed there was a revised
Oh,
meeting
yes.
package. Is there anything, I was just looking at that, so I was like, oh.
So I will address that at the start of the meeting. I'll let you know, John. Just we had some late concerns raised by HTC about some of the appendices. So we're just pulling appendices A, B, and C, but the rest of the document will stand as is.
I gotcha.
Okay.
Oh, it's a much shorter document.
Well, I think we in our haste to get it recirculated, all of the appendices got pulled. So there should still, it's only A, B, and C that we won't include
Right.
for discussion. But because there's draft correspondence for the residents along with the schedule, those will still be included.
Oh, okay.
For tonight's discussion. Yeah.
Yep.
Dolly's looking forward to addressing all of it.
I bet you were. It was a interesting read to go through.
Yeah.
In a good way. It's just like, oh, geez, there's lots of things to consider, for sure.
Yeah. You can see my rosy cheeks because I was running around trying to get stuff done between my two meetings.
Oh, sure. Probably just enjoying a beverage or something.
Well, you know what? I most likely will be after we finish this call.
Mine's Pepsi, so
yes, Pepsi. I have a giant glass of water. It's very exciting.
Hello. I'm tracking towards Santa. I have like perma rosy cheeks and my gut continues to grow. I'm in rough shape, so I'll get a white beard and we'll be good to go. That's right. My kids will love that, or my son, hopefully kids in the future. But anyway, he'll love that until that becomes like not fun anymore. But anyway, how's everyone tonight?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Does anybody mind my shirts hanging behind me here?
Not
at better. All. Okay.
Part of the COVID charm.
All right.
I hid some of the stuff that's usually hanging behind me.
In Microsoft Teams, I'm able to like do a different background, but I haven't been able to figure out Zoom. I don't know if I know I can do it. It's just I have to import images and and I thought I did it right, and I didn't do it right. So.
Hello, Rosanna.
Hello.
How are you?
Hello.
Good, thank you. Everybody.
Wait for Ainsley. Random question. Does anyone know where you can find good real Christmas trees?
Good.
I heard there's like a shortage of those. Did you try Sloan's?
No, I heard that, but Sloan's okay.
How about Colborne United Church? Right by.
Okay.
That's where I used to always get mine, was Colborne United. Yeah.
Good quality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
They were about $45, $50 last year, I think. So I don't know. I've heard prices have skyrocketed this year too. So I don't know. Hopefully they're not gouging people, but
You can get maybe a not so good quality one at the Superstore for $45.
That's true.
I think the Boy Scouts do those.
Twigs glued
It
together.
used to be. I wasn't sure if it was still the Boy Scouts, but it certainly did used to be Boy Scouts that would.
I went there a few years to support them. Yeah. There's a church on Huron Street, just up from Adelaide, on the north side, that often has trees. I just don't know. I haven't seen any this year yet, because I went up that way. But yeah.
Yeah, we're getting our first one, so I'm trying to figure out where to go for it. So we just had a little small artificial one. This year's the real one. Fun.
I have a fake tree, Paul, so I can't offer any good advice.
Maybe the advice is to just get a fake tree.
We always tried a real tree, and I found I put mine up yesterday because I like to have it up for a while, and I would never get to it fast enough with anyway, so that's what works for us.
Yeah, that's true. Hello, Ainsley, how are you?
Hi there, I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm a few minutes late.
Not a problem at all. Okay, well, I think we have everyone assembled, so I'll call the meeting to order then. We'll then proceed to the recognition of Indigenous peoples and lands. So we'd like to begin by acknowledging the treaty territory of the Anishinaabe, which is defined within the pre-Confederation treaty known as the London Township Treaty of 1796. Throughout time, this region has also become the current home to the Haudenosaunee and Lenape nations. With that, we have an agenda before us. Does anyone have any items that they'd like to add to the agenda, amend the agenda, anything like that? No adjustments to the agenda? Okay. All right, there was a revised package, by the way, that was just sent late this afternoon. And Ms. McKenzie, I don't know if you can just quickly speak to that then for everyone's benefit.
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Chair. I apologize for the late circulation of an updated report. We did that within the last hour, so you should have received something from Laura. We had some late concerns that were raised by HDC, and we're just trying to assess the concerns. So just to be cautious, what we've done for now is just to remove appendices A, B, and C from the first report related to regeneration. The rest of it can stand as is, the site recommendations and schedules, and Shelley will be happy to speak to all of that, but just so you're aware, we're removing those three appendices.
So seeing no additions or changes to the agenda, can I have a motion then to approve the agenda? Thank you, Ms. Wilcox, seconded by Ms. Anderson. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor? It is carried. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Does anyone have anything to disclose this evening?
No.
Seeing none. I'm not going to disclose an interest, but I will comment on the regeneration as it comes forward in relation to my day-to-day job. But I'll save that, I think, for that time. So communications. I'm not aware of any communications and nothing's been submitted, so I don't think we have anything there. Delegations, we have no delegation requests, so we'll move on as well. Reports and business. So that takes us to the first item, regeneration, business case 21. Ms. Chowns, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you very much. For the benefit of the board through the chair. So I have the distinct pleasure tonight to present the work of my predecessors. And so I don't proclaim to take any credit for the pieces that have come before my joining the corporation, but I can say that over the course of many years, of course, I've provided a timeline to the group. So reaching all the way back to 2014, folks from this organization, together with folks from the city and HDC, have been contemplating where our best spot would be to embark on what will be a multi-year iterative process of regenerating our portfolio. And so it is, in fact, my distinct pleasure tonight to present to the board our recommendations. And so I first of all would like to recognize the tremendous amount of work that HDC has done on this project. And there's some information contained within the report that speaks to the very detailed and specific planning assessment that they provided on not only the 3 priority sites, but on all of our family locations. And so this was certainly no small undertaking. They deserve to be recognized for that work. As was indicated in my report, through the process of elimination, they were quickly able to pare down the fulsome list to 3 priority sites. And from there, a more detailed analysis was required. And so I have provided some a summary of the data that was contained in their reports. But I wanted to also speak to the fact that in addition to the significant work that HDC undertook on our behalf from a planning perspective, there were many other considerations that were really quite thoughtfully incorporated into our site selection process. And so those included things like the suitability or the potential resilience of the chosen community, the ability of that community to sort of transcend this, what will be a lengthy process, and come out on the other side with resilience. And then also notably, the facility condition index, or the condition of the chosen community. And we needed to reflect on the existing condition of the community within the context of our asset management plan. And we really needed to undertake the exercise of considering what the life cycle of any of the previous capital investments had been, and then what life cycle investments would be required in this community should we elect not to undertake regeneration at it. And so there was a cost analysis that went into that with feasibility, and we wanted to ensure that money wasn't being wasted, that we hadn't invested a ton of money that we would just then be discarding. And so it was important that I share that with the board, because it has been a very thoughtful and lengthy process that has brought us to the point where we are today. And so getting back into the body of the report, there were really 3 priority sites that HDC was able to pare our full list down to. And I've provided a brief summary of sort of the pressing conditions at each one of those sites. And so those 3 priority sites were our family locations at Allen Rush Gardens, Limberlost, and Southdale. And so in summary, all 3 sites have the strong potential for regeneration, and it's really just a matter of timing. With Allen Rush Gardens, there is municipal infrastructure work that needs to be undertaken that has been identified in the city's growth management implementation strategy, or the capital spending plan. And so it would be premature for us to embark on a regeneration project at that location, knowing that those pieces needed to be completed prior to us being able to do our work there, both from a practicality perspective, but also from the capacity perspective. And so right now there appears, without doing a really in-depth engineering analysis at first blush, from the city, what we understand is that there's not enough capacity in potable water. So looking to our Limberlost location, Limberlost is a great site, by the way, really vibrant community there. If you were able to refer to the chart that I provided, Table A, the regeneration site selection criteria highlights, the one thing I wanted to mention about Limberlost was its high walkability score. And so this community has so many great things going for it, including its proximity to public schools, shopping, transit, and a sense of community. There's places of worship, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're very excited about the potential of working in the Limberlost community. But again, looking to the information provided by the city, there appears to be an issue around stormwater capacity in that neighborhood. And so, again, it would be premature of us to embark on a regeneration project there, recognizing that because of stormwater, there may be limitations in terms of basements or flooding, et cetera. And so, not by rocket science, but really through the process of elimination, that brings us to our third community, which is our Southdale community. And again, referring to Table A, the regeneration site selection criteria, Southdale, so to speak, ticks all the boxes. And so, along with the high suitability of the location and the sort of capital investment suitability of it, it also aligns with the objectives outlined in the current London plan. And so there's a potential to do some really exciting neighborhood placemaking at that location and start to bring a different sense of neighborhood to the Southdale streetscape. So, so that's very exciting for us. I'm sure it's very exciting for the city as well. There is some bonusing allowed there, which is interesting because we meet the bonusing criteria for affordable housing. There is an opportunity for us to do some showpiece work, should that be required. So again, very exciting. In terms of what's in the pipes, we meet stormwater, sanitary, and water capacity. There's no concern there. Southdale, like many roads in our community, has widening scheduled for it, but it certainly isn't something that's going to impede our ability to get started at that location because our work would be all up outside the regular road allowance anyway. And then the other thing about Southdale that I wanted to mention to the group was that there are two public schools, a Catholic and a public school within walking distance to the community, but both require children to cross a road to get there. And then there's a large public park that can be accessed again through existing pathways in the community, and they would need to cross the street. And so one of the very exciting things that we hope to do at our Southdale community is provide recreational green space for our residents. And by increasing the density of some of our built form there, it would allow us to have a smaller footprint, which opens up green space for our tenants. And so this feels really a lot like a win-win for the community, where we can provide places for children to play in the community where they live, and that, of course, keeps eyes on the playground. And so that's very exciting for us, and we've actually committed to putting a playground there this year that we do not feel will be interrupted through our regeneration work. And so we want to start to plant those ideas in folks' minds about this being a community where you can live, where you can play, where you have access to transit, where there's a strong potential for mixed use under the guidelines of the current London plan, for some light commercial, support services, and potentially even something like a daycare or light medical. And so for all of those reasons, we are very excited to embark our regeneration at the Southdale location. And so it is our recommendation to the board that you approve our recommendation to proceed at Southdale. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit more before we go to that. I chose to share with you the communication strategy around making this declaration today because I wanted to ensure that the board and, of course, the public understood that we have placed a lot of importance on ensuring that our stakeholders are well communicated, that the folks in our community are engaged, and that we've provided as many opportunities as possible for them to provide input into shaping aspects of the community where they, in fact, will live. And so I've provided a bit of a summary on what that strategy looks like, but should the board elect to approve our recommendation today, we have a plan teed up to commence on Monday with activities in the community over the course of next week, and then a series of outreach events to some of our key stakeholders in the community. And so I've contained, the report contains some of that information. We'd certainly be glad to share a little bit more with you. But I would like to acknowledge Jordan Hubelmans, our communication specialist, who has spent a tremendous amount of time building a stakeholder registry and identifying the folks that we want to not only bring in as community partners, but hold in high regard as key stakeholders throughout the process. I think it's important that we take a community-based approach here and that we build as many advocates for this project early in the game as possible, because it will certainly help us through the various stages of construction, which, of course, as you know, can sometimes feel challenging in a community. So I wanted to acknowledge Jordan for that. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
That's great. Thank you, Ms. Johns. Questions? Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting and exciting. My question is about the communication strategy. So it sounds great. And in my experience, the earlier that everyone is engaged, the better for appeal purposes. My question is whether you considered the first prong speaks to the tenant engagement specifically, and not necessarily the broader community. So the Facebook private group is specific to the tenants. And I'm wondering if that, I don't know if that's the intent. So that's my first question, whether it's specific to tenants. And if it is, have you considered whether that sets up a bit of an us versus them scenario where the existing surrounding neighborhood isn't engaged or is engaged in a different way than the tenants at the subject site, and how to ensure that, because if you're looking at significantly increasing the height or density, that's usually an issue for existing, single-story dwellings, or how is the transition going to work and all of those type of issues. So I'm wondering if the strategy incorporates the broader community in order to engage them also right up at the beginning of the process in terms of form and also density and integration.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you for your question, Ms. Anderson, and through the chair. I have had several extensive conversations with Jordan about this, and so our first onslaught of communication will be to our tenants and key stakeholders, such as municipal and government officials. But we've specifically elected to hold off on what in the construction industry sometimes is called the high neighbor letter, which sort of introduces us to our neighbors and talks about an upcoming project. And the reason why we've decided to just hold off slightly on issuing that letter is because we don't have anything to tell them yet, other than we're going to do something. And so we felt that sometimes in the absence of having concrete information, it can create a lot of angst amongst people knowing that something is happening and that, potentially that their neighborhood is being threatened. And so we have engaged HDC to undertake some concept work for us that we're hoping we might have at our disposal here shortly. And so it may be a more thoughtful approach to understand what that looks like before we reach out to our neighbors. And so in our considerations, we've looked at a couple of different footprints for buildings, and depending on the orientation and placement of the buildings, it may in fact not require us to reach for that bonus density of 6-story. We may be able to maintain a 3- or 4-story profile with very specific easing to the existing neighborhood, so stepping back the profile of the building mass. And so that's the kind of information that I'd like to be able to communicate to our neighbors. I'm certainly open to your recommendations should you feel that immediately is more prudent, but our thought was that we would hold off for what might only be a month or so until we had something more concrete to share.
That sounds good to me. Thanks. I just, it wasn't clear to me in the strategy whether that was intended to be the broader engagement or not. So that clarifies it for me, and it sounds good. Thank you.
Further questions, comments? Ms. Wilcox.
Just a comment. I'm really excited to see this, and today I was taking a look at the housing stability action plan, and there are some really specific concrete measures that are moving forward as a result of this. So I'm happy to see that, and I'm pleased we're taking sort of a tenants first approach in terms of how we're communicating and speaking to them about it's their community and how that impacts them, and I look forward to hearing about it from there.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments? So I have some, before I provide them though, just want to let everyone know that in my role with the city, I would normally be taking forward recommendations to committee and council on planning matters. And I'm assuming there will be having a potential application here. So I wanted to let everyone know here and those that are listening in as well that with my role with the city, I will actually not be doing that, so I can participate as a board member. So someone will be taking that forward on my behalf. So I want to say then, as a board member, I'm very excited about this initiative, and it's great to see. I really appreciate the report, and I really am happy that we're moving forward at this point as well. I think it's really important too that we're being very transparent with this process with the community and with our tenants in particular. So the communication strategy that's been articulated is great. It's a good change, but it's going to be a challenging change, not just for everyone that's living there now, but the people that are in the surrounding community as well too. So the comments that Ms. Anderson had are really good as well too. I just had a couple questions though. One, I'm wondering, Ms. Jones, if you can speak to the existing housing stock state. You did mention that it was part of an asset review that was done in terms of what would be required to be replaced, but just in terms of the condition of the community right now, maybe in a qualitative perspective would be helpful for us to understand.
Certainly, thank you for that question. And so I don't want to paint a false interpretation of this community falling into ruins. That is certainly not the case. We have, of course, endeavored to maintain all of our communities to the best of our ability. This particular community, like many of our family sites, is reaching end of life cycle on many of the major building components. And so we have thoughtfully prepared that 10-year capital spending strategy that we talked about within the context of our asset management plan, and thought about major replacement pieces like furnaces, for example, and considered, does it make sense to replace over 100 furnaces at this location, knowing that we then would be removing some of those. And so I want to assure the board that in no uncertain terms have we disregarded the maintenance needs of this community. That is not the case. However, if you recall from our asset management plan, the overall status of our portfolio is currently graded as poor. And so I can speak from personal experience within this community where you certainly would see things like asphalt parking lots that are breaking up, furnaces that are nearing end of life cycle and therefore are requiring a lot more maintenance, window and doors that are coming up for replacement, and original installations of things like kitchens and floorings. And so we have strategically decided to invest in those types of major building life cycle replacements at some of our other communities while ensuring that we're balancing the operational needs of this community. And so that works with not only our regeneration strategy, but our asset management plan.
Great, thanks for that. That's very helpful to hear for everyone. The other thing too, recognizing that it's really early days right now, I'm just wondering though if there's been consideration to the potential the housing tenures that might be on the site. So are we looking at a potential of mixing rent geared to income housing with market housing and things like that, or is that still yet to be determined?
Thank you for the question. And so our current shareholders agreement with the city doesn't doesn't afford the legal framework for us to implement a strategy with mixed incomes. However, that certainly has been contemplated as part of our regeneration strategy. And so we will work together with you as a board to revisit that shareholder strategy and determine then if it is best to request that we revisit that. That would all certainly contribute to the pro forma of the concept designs that we're working through right now.
That's great, and that leads me to the next question about bringing people along with the journey as we're going forward. So I'm assuming that we're going to have some really robust public meetings, hopefully when we can actually get people together to meet to talk about the various concepts and to get input and have a really good opportunity to have great interfaces with the surrounding areas as well. It's nice when we're not necessarily a for-profit entity where we're trying to maximize the site. So we actually have the ability to try to make sure that those interfaces are as strong as possible. Can you just speak to, if you can speak to some of those journeys that we're going to be taking?
I will, thank you. So of course, we will be required to undertake all of the legal requirements that any developer would if they were redeveloping a site. And so there'll be the required public input sessions, the appropriate notices that will be posted for proposed land use changes, et cetera, et cetera. And those will all be, of course, executed in concert with our friends at the city. However, our initial engagement piece in our community includes some survey pieces where we start to gather information about what folks are looking for. And then it is our intent to continue to keep our tenants engaged throughout the process. And should it be required, we certainly will reach outside of the confines of our own parcel to engage our neighbors as well. I love the fact that you use the word robust discussions with the community, because oftentimes those public participation sessions can be robust, and that's, in my opinion, wonderful because it ensures that we're considering all perspectives before we move cautiously through the next phases. And so you are definitely correct in that it is our intention to be fully transparent throughout the entire process. And we certainly welcome any input from the board should you have any suggestions on ways that we can be even more transparent.
That's great. Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Green.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add that we put together a very robust tenant engagement strategy. We have a tenant engagement team that's been working now for several months to put this together, and we really want to build on community's identity and enhance that. We know that our tenants have a lot of pride in this community, so we want to maintain that and bring the community together through this redevelopment. So there will be lots of different initiatives, our direct involvement in the community, but also in the current COVID environment. We've also put together some plans for Zoom meetings, Facebook Live meetings, to make sure everyone has the opportunity to participate.
That's wonderful. Great, thank you. The final thing I've got then is just a request. When we've identified the key stakeholders for the immediate rollout of what's happening next, we have flagged Councillor Hillier to be notified, which does make sense because he's the ward councillor. I'm wondering though if we could expand that out though to a communication to all members of council, because I think there are citywide implications here with what we're looking to do, and given that we are looking at future sites as well, and this will sort of be a pilot to what we're doing in the future, I think there's some good interest there. I'd also suggest too that we provide a communication to the county as well. Even though we're not looking at redeveloping any county sites, I think it'd be nice for them to know that we're looking at doing this and that we may be engaging them in the future, for example.
Otherwise, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, so we do have a motion, or sorry, we have a recommendation before us to receive the report and then to approve the regeneration site as identified in the report. Would anyone like to make that motion? Ms. Anderson, seconded by Ms. Wilcox. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None. It is carried. That's exciting and wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Great to see we're moving forward for our community. The next item then is a governance review report and correspondence that's been received from Ms. Wilcox, and I'll turn things over to her.
Hey, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to provide a walkthrough of the report that's before you tonight, and I think there are also, Chair, you can let me know what the best process is. There are a couple of things I think I'd like to suggest making an amendment to the report as I go through. So I'm happy to flag those as I provide the review, or I can hold them until the end. Just let me know what the preference is.
Perhaps Ms. Wilcox, if you wouldn't mind flagging them as you go through, I think that'd probably be best. That way we've got everything in context.
Okay, great. So as you'll recall, at our August meeting of the board, I had been asked to serve as the governance lead for the board of directors with regards to specifically undertaking a governance review as was requested and defined in the terms of reference from the shareholder. So I believe it was August 20th, I was approved as the lead for that role, and we did undertake a process to get some third-party support to help us carry out specifically the stakeholder interviews and to do some best practice research as part of the review. So the report that's in front of you tonight reflects the findings of that review, and I have also reflected some broader best practices in the sector as well. So with respect to the purpose and scope that's outlined there, so there are lots of things we can do around a governance review. It can have a very, very large scope. In this case, we are only looking at very specific items, which would include the qualifications of the board, and these are items within the shareholder agreement, composition, appointment process, term, and I would suggest adding here to that section also the transitioning from the current board to the new board. So in terms of the engagement process, there were, I believe, 27 individuals who participated in the engagement process, and the organizations are there before you. And so again, the information gathered through this was used to formulate the recommendations, and this would be a report from the interim board of directors to the shareholder. So in terms of key findings, individuals were asked about what were the key challenges and priorities facing the corporation. You'll see those before you. Hiring a new CEO, addressing operational challenges, items like strategic planning in terms of governance, long-term and financial and capital planning, as well as supporting an increasingly complex range of tenant needs and equity and inclusion. When looking at the qualifications of directors, you'll see there what the current section 6.2 looks like in the shareholder agreement. And I think, what you see there before you is what was reflected in the conversations from those that were interviewed and sort of what was discussed in terms of skill set. I would also note sort of in the bullet around a commitment to social justice, anti-racism, I would add there as well, equity and inclusion as being a requirement, and that the board of directors should reflect the diversity of the community that LMCH serves. So in terms of a recommendation that I've put before you for this section would be that the qualifications of directors are amended into the list that you see before you. I think this reflects sort of looking at what was heard and stated through in the section above from those that were interviewed, and also looking at broader at how other housing corporations speak to some of these items, and just broader what boards are doing in terms of trying to capture the key skill sets that are required. So I think it's key to note here that this is a matrix. It sets out an inventory of ideal skills, experiences, and expertise. It's not intended to be that one single individual holds that that particular skill set. It's on balance. This is what the entire board should reflect. And also noting that everyone brings a different experience, including life experience, to that board. And again, that's reflected in what's on the whole of the board. In terms of composition, again, as you'll be familiar with, the current shareholder agreement states, and what the articles of incorporation state. So I won't go into that in much detail. Adding some context here, and this may be helpful to add into the report. I think in addition to what's before you around the maintaining strong connections to council and to Middlesex County Council, and a feeling that, and certainly recognition that the board should be comprised of a majority of community members. What I would add here would be that nearly all stakeholders interviewed felt that the current board structure, having members of council and county council and the citizens at large, was highly suitable to govern the corporation and encompass the broad range of skills. But making a distinction between structure and size. So while that basic structure was supported, there were many opinions actually expressed about the optimal size of the board. So some people felt that a smaller board might be more effective. Some felt that it should actually be larger because a smaller board may create issues around establishing quorum or having particularly dominant voices on the board, etc. So perhaps adding some context and additional detail there. And another piece that was really discussed was most seemed to feel that the ability, what was highly important is the ability to establish a subcommittee structure within that board with the composition. So having too small of a board, it makes it very difficult to establish subcommittees such as finance, human resources, let's say one around regeneration, et cetera, and sort of being able to effectively manage the roles and responsibilities of the board and the business of the corporation. So with that in mind, the recommendations are that the composition of the board, and I think what I would, just to back up a bit, highlighting here too, that so in addition to what was discussed in terms of size, this is also bringing into consideration what was noted to be of importance in the qualifications discussion, and that is bringing lived experience to the board and looking out to other housing corporations. Most ranged in size from 9 to 12 members, some with more, but many have tenants included on the board. So the recommendation before you is that the board be expanded to 9 members, and that the additional 2 board positions or director positions are for tenants of LMCH. I think I would add a note, suggest to add a note as well, perhaps further clarification here around that once that board's in place, that the new board consider establishing, have that discussion at that time around what that subcommittee structure looks like. As you know, the subcommittee structure is not part of the shareholder agreement, but it certainly is key to how a board functions. So looking at section D with regards to the appointment process, I would add here that there was some discussion too that was flagged around the importance of conducting evaluations of the board on a regular basis. So in addition to that appointment process, as you may recall, the terms of reference for the board of directors includes a specific piece around evaluation. So in terms of looking at the appointment process, so it would be that establishing a subcommittee of the board of directors to assist with the recruitment and nomination process, and this be comprised of a mix of board members, LMCH staff, and community members. And this subcommittee would then make recommendations to the board and then recommendations through to the shareholder. and thinking through the themes that have come through and the top issues identified in the stakeholder interviews, recommending that a set of foundational principles be established to guide the board recruitment. There are some suggestions here, but that certainly would be for the new board to determine, and that it should also be informed by the board terms of reference. Again, it outlines the authority and responsibility requirements and general duties of the board. I would suggest perhaps in this section we could add some further detail on actions should be taken to conduct evaluations of the board on an annual basis as outlined in the board terms of reference. So in terms of term, again, lots of discussion around what that term might look like. There was a general consensus that the council member appointments should be 4 years to align with the municipal election cycle. I think what is in there right now may just be reflective of when we were on a 3-year cycle. And that given the complex nature of the work of this board, that it takes quite some time to get up to speed and feel comfortable in your role and to understand it. So many stakeholders also noted that a 4-year term would provide directors with the opportunity to learn the business and become effective directors of the corporation. But there was discussion as well that continuity is really, really important, and that what should not happen is a full turnover of the board all at the same time. So as it was noted, other jurisdictions do have local boards where continuity is supported from by taking a class approach where board member terms are staggered. But there was discussion from the stakeholders that were interviewed that 2 consecutive 4-year terms would be the sort of optimal length of the tenure, and that would allow sort of ensuring that there's fresh perspectives on the board, as the turnover occurs. So in terms of, I'd like to ask that we amend this section a bit around the recommendations. I think just to make it a bit more generic. So the bullet around the community and tenant directors, suggesting that it just be amended to that the community and tenant directors serve staggered terms with a maximum number of reappointments and a maximum of 8 consecutive years in total, and that reappointments for another term may be submitted to municipal council for consideration. I think there's a really important section here as well on, and maybe it's suggests that maybe we make this a bit more visible. Perhaps it's section F in this in the report for the transition of the interim from the interim board of directors. So in this part, there was a recommendation there and speaks to the current board of directors, that 2 members be retained and from a continuity perspective serve a time-limited role. I'd suggest augmenting this a bit, that there were many ideas expressed about the most effective way to transition from where we are today to a community-based board. The most widely preferred solution in those discussions was that the current board of directors serve as ex officio members of the new board for a period of 6 months following the appointment of that board. So augmenting this to say, notwithstanding that proposed approach, what I've put before you is that the recommendation that consideration be given to having 2 members of the current board serve as the first class of directors with a time limit appointment of 1 year. This supports continuity, stability for the organization and the board, and also that knowledge transfer that needs to happen during that really important transition process. So I think that probably covers most. And again, there's a summary of the recommendations at the end, but I hope that's some helpful context, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much. Questions, comments? Mr. Milson.
Hi, thanks. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question on how many people were interviewed through this process? Do you know the numbers?
Yes, and through you, Chair, 27 individuals were interviewed.
Okay. Thanks. Just a couple comments. I just really I like the process that we went through. and I think we've got a really good framework for going forward. It hasn't changed a whole lot, but it's added two additional members to the board. I think there's a lot of thought that's been gone through this, and I don't think you mentioned it, but maybe you did, around the importance of having a really robust, we've used that word a lot tonight, but on ramping of new members and the orientation aspect of, because there is lots to know about the business that this organization does. So I was really glad to see that aspect of the recommendations. And yeah, that's kind of all my questions I have at this moment. Comments. Thanks.
Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, I think just to build on the onboarding and training, that was a really key theme that came up through those that were interviewed, and that it is a really, really important piece, and that given the complexity of the work and the key role that LMCH plays in our community, that sufficient onboarding and I think a sort of an iterative approach to that, ongoing training as required as well, is really important for supporting members to be able to clearly understand their role. And so part of that also is really digging into, I think, what is within the shareholder agreement, things like a board terms of reference, a code of conduct, other pieces of getting into and really digging into those so that folks feel comfortable.
That's great. Further, and Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I have questions with respect to the composition section. So I know the report summarizes the themes of what was heard. So a couple of questions, but I'll break them up into smaller ones. What was your experience either in best practices or across the interviews with respect to the range of options for political representation on the board? So did you find that there were in any instances more than 2 members being councillors, or no members of council, or all members of council? What's the range of options there, and how did you land on the recommendation of 2?
Mrs. Wilcox.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yeah, so that's a great question. So there is a real range. There are some local housing corporations that have a board that would be almost entirely, I think Hamilton comes to mind, where I believe it's almost entirely political, if not fully all political stakeholders. Others where, sort of a mirror of what we have. And lots of, I would say on the whole, most would have a majority of community members of those that we looked at. And of those, many had tenants as part of that composition. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I was wondering specifically about political representation. In all instances, there would be some political representation, ranging to, I think what you said in Hamilton was almost entirely.
Ms. Wilcox?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yes, my apologies. Yes, that would be correct. Yes, all boards that we looked at have political representation. It would range from, I would say, 2 all the way up to a full board of political representation.
Thank you. And another one through you, Mr. Chair, specifically about the size of the board, and what was the range that you found in the best practices or the suggestions from the interviewees with respect to size?
Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I think there was, and certainly what the feedback that came back through those that were interviewed around the size. So there was I would say a general feeling that the current membership of 6 was suitable. If you looked at a structure, and I think that was coming at it from, here's the breakdown of having 2 members of council, 1 member of Middlesex County Council, and the remainder being the community at large. That worked. Varying opinions in those interviews about what the size of the board might be in terms of numbers. So some felt that the current board, being us, that it seems to be effective in terms of having 4 members, and that allows the business of the corporation to be carried on. And so some sort of felt that that could be small. Others felt that given the complexity of the nature and sort of the work of a corporation like LMCH, that the ability to have a subcommittee structure it becomes very important. So most of those interviewed reference that need to be able to work at that subcommittee level. That allows sort of to dig in on various topics or subjects and to be able to move that to the board. This generally felt that that was a more effective approach. So having that in mind, there were some who felt that a larger board, again, allows for that subcommittee structure to be effective. Also that it allows that maybe you don't have 1 or 2 dominant voices. I mean, that certainly could happen, I guess, within a small board too. But again, sort of getting at the effectiveness of the board. So when we looked out at others, again, if you look at good I would say comparisons or comparable LHCs to LMCH, those I believe ranged from 3 to, I have it here, just 1 second. It's 3 to 12. I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the right number. I can't find it. I believe it's 3 to 12. So, and I think if you look out broader, so at ones that like Toronto, for instance, they are a little bit larger than that. So it was felt in sort of in that looking at best practices from comparable local housing corporations, that 9 would be suitable to allow that subcommittee structure could be put into place and be effective and sort of balance out the other pieces that were highlighted.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just one more question. To go from 7 to 9 as proposed, did you consider whether the 2 tenants could just form part of the 4 citizens at large, like whether the size of the board overall didn't need to increase, or and if you could explain the rationale, like the pros and cons of adding on to get a larger board?
Yes, certainly. Sorry, apologies. Thank you, Chair. Through you. Yeah, I think it's a balance, right? Of I think so. There's a couple of pieces through that. So the moving to a larger board, slightly larger, does allow for I think perhaps a more effective subcommittee work, where it's I would say that smaller numbers on a board means that difficult to try and find sort of adequate numbers to work at a subcommittee level and bring those reports up to the board of directors. So I think part of it is balancing that, and I think when we went and looked out, and I think what a theme comes through as well is, I mean, certainly you could have where just adjusting that rather than augmenting the size of the board by 2 members to have instead have 2 of the community members be tenants. I think you certainly could do that. When we looked at other boards, they tended to be a bit larger and included 2 tenants. So you maintain a majority of community, but I think part of it. So a few things. When you look at the skill set required on this board, perhaps having 9 members also allows the board to be able to, look on the whole of the composition of the skills and requirements or skills and qualifications that we're looking for to do that. So, I mean, I think including tenants is really important in terms of, again, it's done in many other communities, and while we do have structures such as the Tenant Advisory Council, ensuring that lived experience and tenants who are the people we serve as an organization are part of the board, I think is really important. And so when you look at sort of an approach to equity and inclusion and participation and also lived experience, I think, again, you're building in the pieces to be able to do that. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but
you have. And just one more that kind of came to mind as a result of that answer. So does this recommendation secure the subcommittee structure, or that would be determined by the new board, and the larger size enables that, whereas a smaller board may not? Is that the idea?
not sure, maybe Paul's frozen. Holding. I'll just through the chair. We can wait until
our chair is frozen.
The joys of
lost
Zoom.
him now.
He's speechless. There he is. For a bit.
Sorry about that, guys. My apologies. I lost the connection. I also realized that it must be very awkward for the vice chair to be presenting an item and then also facilitating the discussion. So anyway, hopefully this stays good.
No problem. I was just waiting for recognition from you, Chair. So
yeah, well, Ms. Wilcox.
And thank you. And Ms. Anderson, would you mind repeating the question for me?
Sure.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Is Ms. Anderson frozen?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, just leave.
It's that 6 o'clock internet surge. Okay. Wait a few more moments here, hopefully.
I think what I...
Sorry, Ms. Anderson, we lost you there. Are you with us now? Ms. Anderson? She's got a smile on her face. That's good. As always. Okay. I think last time when this occurred, she actually did call in. So maybe we'll wait to see for a few moments. Yeah.
I'm back. Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, yes, we can. Lovely. Welcome back. Hopefully. Okay. We'll just have a brief intermission here. I don't think we need to formally recess. If everyone can just bear with us, we'll wait, because I think it's important that all the questions on this are asked and answered. So. Maybe while we're waiting for Ms. Anderson, from my perspective, I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you very much for all the hard work on this, both you and Ms. McKenzie, because I know it was a lot of putting this together. So I think the listing of qualifications is quite strong and really helping with a good diverse board going forward. So I think that's really going to be a great value add to the corporation and to the community writ large. So thank you. Ms. Anderson, are you back? No. Oh.
Brief movement.
Oh. Ms. Anderson.
Am I back?
Yay! Over to you.
Right, if I can remember what I had asked. I think what I
Great. Oh, where am I? Okay.
I was asking if this, oh no.
Yeah, you're good now.
No, maybe just try turning the video off quickly, or just where you're.
Yeah. I don't think I ever remember to give her a text, unfortunately. Ainsley, if you, oh, okay. Maybe while we're waiting for Ms. Anderson to join us and to have the further questions, perhaps procedurally what we could do is Ms. Wilcox has a motion she'd like to put on the floor. Perhaps we could have her move that, I would assume, and have a seconder for the motion, and then we could have further debate and discussion. So at least procedurally, we're moving forward. So Ms. Anderson is going to move the motion that is identified in the agenda package. Would you like to speak, or would you like to amend the motion at all, Ms. Wilcox, or is it as here?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I do wonder if perhaps it should be amended. I have brought, seeking the motion is that, so let me grab it here, that the recommendations in the report before you be endorsed, and then that part B is that the chair and vice chair of the board be directed to submit this report to municipal council for consideration. So I know I have outlined a number of areas where I think there could be some perhaps further clarity added and some changes. So perhaps we may need to add to the motion. I would suggest adding to the motion that gives that the board is okay with those amendments being made, and sort of that we be charged with making them as discussed and finalizing that report for submission to municipal council. In terms of timing, just as a reminder, we would be submitting this. It's due to the city clerk's office this coming Monday, and then it would be discussed at committee on December 16th, Strategic Priorities and Policies Committee.
Okay. Ms. Anderson, I'm thinking you might be on the phone. Just as an FYI, what we're doing is we're just procedurally proceeding with putting the motion on the floor, and then we can have further debate and discussion for any remaining questions and items like that.
Thank you.
Okay. So Ms. Wilcox then, so the motion would be reading as A. We would include a new B that would read that the vice chair be authorized to amend the correspondence to reflect the statements that were made as part of the presentation or something like that. We'll work with Ms. Palmer on the wording of that, but that's the gist of the motion, I'm assuming then?
Yes.
And then C, the new C would read then that the chair and vice chair are directed to submit the report to municipal council for consideration. So is there a seconder then for that motion? Mr. Milson, thank you. Okay, further debate and discussion then. Ms. Anderson, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My final question that I was trying to ask earlier was just with respect, again, to the composition and size of the board. Is the idea then that the larger board enables the subcommittee structure and perhaps a smaller one would not, and the recommendations and the best practices reflect that a subcommittee structure is recommended?
Ms. Wilcox?
Yes, thank you, through your chair. Yes, I believe that's correct. So I think it does reflect in the sort of the recommendation when we looked out, and also based on the the key themes that surfaced in the discussion about the composition was that a board that was a bit larger would support the ability to have a highly functioning and effective subcommittee structure. I would note, though, with that that is a recommendation, and you may have asked this, and I apologize for losing my train of thought. I could have answered it much earlier and saved all the frozen Zoom. But the subcommittee structure is not articulated in the shareholder agreement. And so not suggesting that the shareholder agreement is amended to include that. I think that making a statement that this is a key piece, that when the new community-based board is in place, that they would seek to revisit the subcommittee structure and figure out what that may look like.
Okay, thank you. So I'm comfortable. I'll be supporting the motion. It sounds to me like the report reflects the best practices analysis and the feedback that was received through the interview process.
Great. So Ms. Wilcox, can you then speak quickly? Sorry, are there any further questions, comments, debate matters? Yeah, Mr. Milson.
Thank you. Through the chair, was there through the process or the survey that was done, or was there any indication that highly effective boards do have subcommittees? Because that for me is seeing how it's been. I've been involved in boards that's run both ways, and from my experience, I feel that highly effective boards do have subcommittees, and that would be the reason why I support a larger board for sure. I think 9 is a minimum for subcommittee. If you have 3 subcommittees, for example, I'm not suggesting that there should be 3 subcommittees for London Middlesex Community Housing Corp or not, but it just allows for of having 3 different board members on each of the 3 different subcommittees. That would be 9. Not saying that I'm suggesting that there should be 3 board members on every subcommittee either, but I'm just saying 9 would allow you to have that structure. Anyways, it's just been my experience that highly effective boards also have highly effective subcommittees. I wondered if there's any indication that was indicated through the review.
Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yes, so that was definitely part of the discussion. So it was, and I would offer a correction. I think someone asked me earlier kind of what was the range. So actually we looked at the comps to the LHCs. It was actually 9 to 11 members in terms of boards. But when we talked to those other local housing corporations, they certainly felt that functioning subcommittees are key importance to drive the business. And the point of establishing subcommittees was emphasized particularly strongly in the interviews. It was noted by many that functional subcommittees are key importance to drive the business, and it would be ideal to have the ability to establish subcommittees that are focused on key areas like finance or HR, sort of policy, etc. So no specific recommendations on what those subcommittees might look like. Clearly that would be within the purview of the new board, but definitely a recognition that a larger board does allow for a better functioning subcommittee structure.
Great. Anything further for Ms. Wilcox on this? Seeing none, would you mind just speaking about the next steps then?
So thank you, through you, Chair. In terms of next steps, I would undertake the revisions to the report over the next couple of days, aiming to get that done by end of day Friday. Also, so it would move into being it's a recommendation report from the interim board of directors. We'd obviously put this under an LMCH letterhead as well, going along with a letter to municipal council from the chair and vice chair. We also have the opportunity, we do have delegation status at the meeting of the 16th, so we could pull a summary report or a presentation together as well for that. But yes, so the submission would be Monday, next Monday, whatever the day that is, I don't know, December apparently, and, at 9 a.m. and then for consideration, depending on what time we're scheduled for, on the 16th.
Thanks a lot. So we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Seeing and hearing no further debate, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none. Perfect. It is approved. Thank you very much. Looking forward to having this going forward, and I know this shareholder will be quite happy to see it coming forward too. So thank you for the quick turnaround. All right, that then brings us to new business and inquiries. Seeing that we had none identified earlier on, we'll move on then to adjournment. A great meeting tonight, everyone. As always, lots of really important things for the organization moving forward. Would anyone like to move a motion to adjourn? Ms. Wilcox, thank you very much. Seconded by Mr. Milson. Appreciate it. Any debate on that? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a great night.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.